What if the one person who wasn't supposed to see saw everything? The house was quiet, too quiet, that kind of silence that rings in your ears, making every breath feel like a betrayal. Richard Callahan, my husband, was on another business trip, third one this month. Always the same explanation. Real estate networking is key, sweetie. But we both knew. We hadn't been each other's priority in a long time. I told myself I didn't care. Loneliness had become a routine. But that night, the emptiness pulled harder than usual. The wine dulled it, 2 glasses in, my bitterness faded. A third glass made me careless. The TV was on, some old rom-com murmuring in the background. It wasn't really playing for anyone. Just noise to keep the dark at bay. My mind wandered elsewhere. Then I heard it. A floorboard creak from the stairs. My breath caught. The house was supposed to be empty. But it wasn't. Liam Callahan was there. My stepson. Home from college for the weekend. I hadn't heard him come in. When I turned, he was already in the doorway. Frozen. I froze too, stunned by the moment, the misunderstanding, the unspoken confusion in his face. His eyes met mine, wide, startled, and unreadable. I dropped my glass. It shattered on the hardwood. But even that sound felt distant. The real impact was the realization. He'd seen a part of me I never meant to expose. Not like that. Not to him. Liam Callahan wasn't a child anymore. But he also wasn't someone I had ever truly connected with. Richard Callahan brought him into our lives when he was 12. I tried to be his mother, truly. But time, grief, and distance turned us into polite strangers more than family. And yet, in that 10 seconds, something between us shifted. Not attraction, that would be wrong. It was something else. A mirror. We were both lonely. Both unsure. Both stuck in a house full of silence and unsaid things. He cleared his throat, muttered something about needing his phone charger, and walked away. But I knew we had crossed into a silence that wouldn't be easy to walk back from. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. I heard a soft knock on the door. I said nothing. I could have opened it. I didn't. In that moment, everything inside me begged for comfort. But I stayed still. What came after wasn't an affair. It wasn't about passion or betrayal. It was about guilt, about mistakes we let grow in silence. About what happens when people in the same house stop seeing each other until it's too late. I wish I could tell you this story ends neatly. That I fixed it. But truth is, this story began with a knock, and everything changed from there. I was there at his soccer games. I stayed through every slammed door and every cold look that came with the phrase, "You're not my mom." Grief is persistent. It doesn't care that you meant well. By the time Liam Callahan went off to college, we had become strangers who coexisted. When he came home for the holidays, he spoke to Richard Callahan, not to me. I told myself it didn't hurt. That I was fine. That the distance was a relief. The night Liam Callahan walked in on me, I wasn't thinking about him at all. Just the silence. The alcohol. And Richard Callahan's side of the bed untouched for 6 nights. When Liam Callahan knocked on my door later that night, his voice was strained with something unfamiliar. I should have turned him away. But instead, I let the moment happen. I didn't let him in physically, but I let the boundaries blur. Not intentionally. Just enough to make everything more complicated. He brought up what he saw. Not directly. Hinted at it. I could have brushed it off. Pretended I didn't understand. But his stare, intense, confused, almost pleading, didn't let me. I'm sorry you saw that, I told him. His jaw twitched. No need to apologize. Then softer, I get it. I know what loneliness feels like. It hit me, then, he wasn't a kid anymore. And that scared me. Not because of what he felt, but because I realized how fragile I had become. What followed wasn't explosive. It was slow. Quiet. Innocent moments that shouldn't have meant much. Lingering eye contact in the kitchen. Shared silences. Passing comments late at night. We started acting like two people trying to comfort each other. Not like family. The roles blurred. And then one night, he said it. You deserve more than someone who keeps disappearing on you. I let those words mean more than they should have. I let myself believe, in that weak moment, that maybe I wasn't crossing a line. That maybe I just needed to feel seen. But the universe doesn't let you escape your choices. It brings consequences faster than you think. I found out through a text. Just 3 words, he's coming back. Richard Callahan, who was supposed to be away for the rest of the week, cut his trip short. His message was simple. Meeting wrapped early. Home by 9. I froze. Sat in front of the TV, heart racing. Liam Callahan looked over. What's wrong? I handed him the phone. His face shifted, not panic. Just calculation. We've got 6 hours, he said. That didn't make me feel better. It made everything worse. We moved like people cleaning up a mistake, not like people in control. Changed sheets. Opened windows. Lit candles. Hid what we thought could betray us. Liam Callahan tried to reassure me. He won't notice anything. But when he reached for my hand one last time, I pulled away. His eyes darkened. It's too late, Nora Bennett, he said quietly. You can't undo it now. And he was right. Because in the days that followed, I found out I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. We never talked about what happened that night. Not because we forgot, but because speaking it out loud would make it real. And the truth was worse than silence. One afternoon, as I folded laundry, Liam Callahan appeared in the doorway. You can't keep pretending, he said. I'm not, I whispered, heart pounding. You look at me like you're searching for something, he added, his voice low. My hands trembled. We have to stop this. I said that phrase often in the weeks that followed like a mantra, hoping it would erase the guilt. But guilt doesn't fade with repetition. It waits. Gross teeth. And ours was about to bite. Richard Callahan changed his routine without warning. A casual comment on the phone. I'll work from home this week. Miss seeing your face around. Liam Callahan froze mid-bite. Our eyes met for one brief second enough. Richard Callahan's fork clattered on his plate. Something wrong? Just burned my tongue, Liam Callahan replied smoothly, sipping orange juice. We had tried to be cautious, but the cracks had started to show. One evening I forgot to delete a text message. Just one. During dinner my phone buzzed. Richard Callahan picked it up. Liam Callahan, need anything from the store? Harmless. Except Liam Callahan was sitting right across the table. His phone hadn't moved. Richard Callahan's expression didn't change. But the air did. Later, I found my charger unplugged. My phone dead. I found a receipt in the laundry. Belmont Motel, room 214. Tuesday. The day Richard Callahan had been in Chicago. The day I had said I needed time alone. I burned the receipt in the sink, the paper curling into ash. When I turned, Richard Callahan was in the doorway. 2 days later, Liam Callahan found me in the garage. We need to talk about Lindsay. There's nothing to talk about. If you back off now, he'll know. I pulled away from his grip. Or maybe he's hiding something too. The words felt hollow. Bitter. Liam Callahan's eyes narrowed. Then maybe we're all just lying to each other. I began to notice signs. The GPS in my car had been reset. The home security camera shifted angles. Richard Callahan's laptop always closed when I walked in. Dad. Liam Callahan said one evening, voice heavy. Richard Callahan stepped out from the shadows. His voice cold and calm. Don't call me that. Silence. Then the quietest sound. Suitcase wheels sliding across the floor. Richard Callahan stood at the top of the stairs, adjusting the handle until the leather creaked. His wedding ring caught the hallway light. Wow, he said. 3 months. I flinched. That's all he gave me. Then he looked at Liam Callahan. Get out. Liam Callahan didn't argue. He grabbed his keys. Drove away. Richard Callahan stayed still. Then at last he spoke. I knew something was wrong. The way you two acted when I walked into a room. His voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The damage was done, not just by what we did, but by what we let happen in the silence. She became the architect of her own unraveling, revealing how self-appointed victimhood can sometimes mask a reluctance to confront the truth of one's actions. The shift in the stepson's behavior, from silent complicity to accusatory distance, reflects a broader truth. In imbalanced dynamics, the balance of perception eventually tilts. In the attempt to distance ourselves from blame, we often reshape the narrative to feel less guilty. But some decisions don't offer clean exits. Some damage isn't reversible, the kind that erodes not just marriages or reputations, but the sense of self. Her true punishment wasn't public judgment, but the echo of her own conscience. A quiet, enduring awareness that no amount of time or justification could silence. The story critiques our cultural obsession with scandal, where digital audiences act as moral authorities without reflecting on their own complexities. Public outrage becomes a performance, often revealing more about the performers than the subject. In the end, it's a sobering reminder of the cost of seeking temporary comfort over long-term truth, how emotional shortcuts can turn affection into pressure and vulnerability into leverage. Most of all, it teaches that not all pain fades, not all damage can be undone, and sometimes the harshest exile comes not from others, but from the lives we can never return to. Days without Liam Callahan, without Richard Callahan, and without myself, at least the part of me that used to smile, that used to believe in something called family. After Liam Callahan drove away, and Richard Callahan walked out carrying a suitcase heavier than any words he might have said, the house fell into a silence I had never known before. Not the quiet of midnight, but the stillness of a place that had just lost its soul. I tried to clean everything, the dinner table, the living room, myself, but how do you tidy up the emptiness they left behind? How do you wipe away glances, conversations, choices that shatter quietly under your own hands? In the beginning, I lived like a ghost. No one called, no one asked. Everything I used to do to hold life together, cooking, watering plants, arranging flowers, had become mechanical, motions without meaning, a performance of what used to be normal. Each morning I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Richard Callahan, or a sign from Liam Callahan. There was nothing. Liam Callahan disappeared from every platform, no emails, no calls. It was as if he had never existed, at least not in my world. A phone call that lasted less than 5 minutes. I didn't tell her everything, just that Richard Callahan had left, that Liam Callahan wasn't here anymore. She didn't ask for more, just let out a quiet sigh. I could hear the water boiling on her stove, the soft rustle of wind brushing against her kitchen curtains. At the end of the call, she said just one thing, not because I wanted to preserve memories, but because I was afraid that one day I'd pretend to forget, and if I forgot, I would repeat everything. At first, the entries were nothing more than scribbled emotions. Can't breathe today, didn't sleep, dreamed of Richard Callahan smiling, but slowly the words deepened, took shape. I began to remember the little things I used to overlook. Liam Callahan once left a note on the milk carton back in high school, out of milk. Sorry, Richard Callahan used to text me in the middle of meetings in Chicago, just to ask if I'd had lunch. One time when I was sick with the flu, Liam Callahan ordered food from my favorite place and left it quietly at the door. Those memories didn't save me, but they made the pain sharper, because I realized I had been loved in the quietest of ways, and I had hurt them in the loudest way possible. No return address, just one name on the envelope, Nora Bennett. The handwriting slanted slightly, but was clear, deliberate. It was from Liam Callahan. It took me more than half an hour to open it. Inside, there was no blame, no anger, no apology either. Liam Callahan simply wrote, "We went too far without ever realizing when we should have stopped." But I think the worst part isn't what happened, it's that we're no longer the people who once needed each other so innocently. I thought I was strong, but the truth is I was just a boy who wanted to be seen, wanted to matter. And you did too, didn't you? I'm not coming back, but I hope you won't disappear from yourself. I cried until my tears blurred the last lines of the letter. Not because Liam Callahan was gone, but because he had understood me, perhaps even more deeply than Richard Callahan ever did. But in October, I received an email from his attorney. Everything was formal, perfectly composed. A notice of separation, a proposed division of assets, and a single line at the very end. Despite everything, Nora Bennett, there was a time I truly loved you. I printed the email, folded it, placed it inside my journal. I never replied. That some mistakes can't be washed away with apologies. That not everyone will forgive you, and that doesn't mean they're cruel. Sometimes, forgiveness can be a quiet form of injustice when the other person has to live with the consequences forever. That when we let emotion override reason, we don't just hurt ourselves, we dismantle the very things we once considered sacred. And most importantly, not every wound needs to heal. Some scars are meant to stay, to remind us of boundaries of morality, and of the compassion we once lost. I don't live in that house anymore. I moved into a small apartment near the sea, a place where soft morning light filters through the windows, and the sound of waves has replaced any need for an alarm clock. I teach English to immigrants now. I cook for myself. I replanted a pot of lavender, the same kind Richard Callahan once gave me. I wouldn't call it happiness, not entirely, but I'm living with the truth, with the consequences, and with the quiet hope that maybe someday, I'll be able to forgive myself, even if I never forget. 3 months later, winter had begun to creep into every crack of the small apartment I now called home. There was no longer the warmth of someone beside me, nor the half-hearted conversations that used to fill the void. Each morning, I made a cup of tea, opened the window, looked out at the sea, and reminded myself, this is the price I have to pay. I began writing more, not just in my journal. I scribbled thoughts onto anything I could find, receipts, the back of cereal boxes, even old envelopes. There was something about putting it into words that made me feel, not completely invisible. One day, I saw a couple arguing on the balcony across from mine. They shouted the very things I used to swallow. "You never really listen," the woman cried, and I saw myself in that sentence. Not the one saying it, but the one who had longed to be heard. During a parent meeting at the English class I now taught, a student asked me, "Do you believe in redemption?" I hesitated, then replied I do, but not everyone gets the chance. My students, most of them refugees, migrants, or survivors of loss, taught me far more than I could teach them. They still smiled. They still hoped. And I learned to be silent when needed. One rainy night, I reopened Liam's letter. I read the final line again and again. I think the worst part isn't what happened, it's that we're no longer the people who once needed each other so innocently. That hit me. Out of all the chaos, that moment was the true sentence. Not Richard's departure. Not Liam's last glance. But the fact that I had lost the part of myself that once knew right from wrong, the part that once knew when to stop. I never saw myself as the victim. I was the one who made choices. And now, I was learning to live with them. I hung an old photo on the wall, not a family portrait, but a picture I took on a solo trip when I was 27. I was standing on a wooden bridge in Kyoto, arms raised toward the sky. I don't remember exactly why I was smiling in that photo, but I remember how it felt. Light, unburdened, fearless. I want to find that woman again. Not to start over, but to make sure I never lose myself like that again. One morning in March, I received an email from Liam. No subject. No greeting. Just one line. I'm doing well. I hope you are too. I didn't reply, but I smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because at last I could read those words without crying. His name was Mateo Reyes, 41 years old, from Guatemala. He was one of the quietest students in my class, always sitting in the back corner, always taking notes diligently, and almost never asking questions. There was something in his eyes that reminded me of myself. A sadness with no name, but also without resentment. A man surviving, not truly living. One day, after class, when everyone else had left, Mateo approached my desk. He handed me a wrinkled piece of paper. On it was a short sentence in broken English, written with effort. I want to talk about my story. Not for help. For breathe. I nodded. We agreed to meet that Saturday afternoon at a small cafe by the sea, the same one where I often sat to write in my journal. Mateo told me about the life he left behind. A wife who died giving birth, an aging mother, a daughter he raised alone in a poverty-stricken border town. He had left it all behind to work here, hoping to send money home. And in the process, he had lost himself. Back home, I was a father, a son. Here, I'm just a shadow, he said. His eyes didn't waver. I didn't know why his words hit me so deeply. Maybe because I too had once been a shadow. Maybe because, for the first time in a long time, I recognized pain that didn't belong solely to me. After that, we started seeing each other more often. Not because we needed each other, but because we understood each other. Our conversations were quiet, unhurried, no one trying to fix the other, yet somehow patching up old wounds without realizing it. Matteo always carried an old, worn-out camera. "I take pictures to remember I've once seen beauty," he said. One afternoon, he took a photo of me reading by the window. I laughed, saying, "I don't think I'm beautiful anymore." He didn't reply, just showed me the photo. And for the first time in months, I saw myself unbroken. I don't call it love. I dare not. What we had didn't have a name. It was like an umbrella in the rain, not enough to keep you entirely dry, but enough to stop you from drowning. One evening, he handed me a carefully folded letter. "For my daughter," he said. "Write it in English for me, so she knows her father is learning for her." I wrote the letter, but at the end I added one small line. "Your father is brave, and he still believes in the light, even when all he's seen is darkness." I never told Matteo about that line, but I hoped that one day, when his daughter read it, she'd know her father was never alone in this foreign land. Spring came late that year. The lavender I planted on my balcony still refused to bloom, but that was okay. I had learned that some things take time, and some things may never bloom again, yet we can still love the soil where they once tried to grow. I met Richard one sunny afternoon at the courthouse to sign the final separation papers. He looked thinner than before, quieter, no longer the man who used to text me just to ask if I'd eaten, but someone who had once loved me in his own way, and in doing so, lost both me and himself. We didn't say much. Just one thing as we stepped outside the building, he turned to me and said, "Despite everything, I think, there was something truly beautiful between us, wasn't there?" I nodded. Yes, and that's why I'll never forget it. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Forgiveness isn't about erasing memories, it's choosing to keep them without letting them keep hurting you." And Liam? I hadn't heard from him in a long time, but sometimes he still appeared in my dreams, nameless, fleeting dreams, where two people sit together as if they were once lost souls, once mistaken, but each continuing on in separate directions. I never wrote to him. I believed Liam needed silence more than words, and I had learned how not to name something that never had the chance to grow the right way. Matteo still came to class regularly. His daughter, Luz, had written back in trembling English, "Daddy, I am proud. You are my hero." I cried reading that line, not because I had helped write it, but because I saw within it something I had once hoped a child of mine might say, if I had one. One afternoon, Matteo placed his old camera in my hands and said, "Now it's your turn to capture what beauty looks like to you." I smiled, turned it on, and took a photo. In it was him, smiling, coffee cup in hand, sunlight streaming over his shoulder, and inside me the storm had finally passed. I didn't love Matteo, but I was deeply grateful for him, for showing up, for not trying to rescue me, but simply sitting beside me, until I could stand again. 3 years later, I published my first book, Things We Don't Need to Forget, not a memoir, but a collection of quiet stories about forgiveness, about mistakes, about ordinary people who lost their way and still managed to find themselves again. I received an anonymous email, I read it all, and I'm not angry at you anymore, just sad that you couldn't forgive yourself sooner. I didn't reply, but I knew, he had understood at last. I don't call this the ending, because life doesn't end, it shifts, it bends, it brings late blooming seasons and people learning to live again. After what once seemed impossible, I no longer live in regret, I live in honesty, and on quiet mornings, when the sunlight brushes across my bed like a gentle embrace, I close my eyes and whisper, though I once lost my way, at least now I've come home to myself.